The sun peeked through the curtains, its rays gently warming my face. I opened my eyes and stretched my arm across the bed, expecting to feel Linda's body next to mine. But her side was empty and cold. With a sigh, I glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. She was probably downstairs already, preparing breakfast like the dutiful wife she portrayed herself to be. I pulled myself out of bed and padded down the hallway toward the kitchen, the plush carpet caressing my bare feet. Sure enough, Linda stood at the marble counter, slicing fruit with meticulous precision. "Morning," I said, announcing my presence. She turned and graced me with that bright smile that used to make my heart skip a beat. "Good morning, darling." Linda stepped over and planted a kiss on my cheek. "I was just getting your grapefruit ready. You have that big meeting today, don't you?" I nodded, taking a seat at the breakfast nook. Johnson's company could be our biggest acquisition yet if I can seal the deal. "I know you'll knock it out of the park as always." The words of encouragement felt rehearsed, like an actor reciting her line. As Linda busied herself plating the grapefruit and pouring my coffee, I studied her. Her chestnut hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup impeccable, not a single strand out of place. Just like the rest of this grandiose suburban home we inhabited, a masterpiece of appearances. We ate in relative silence, the gentle clinking of utensils against porcelain the only sound. These days, it seemed we had little to say to each other beyond superficial niceties. "I'm heading to the gallery this afternoon," Linda said as I drained the last of my coffee. "The new summer exhibition is being installed." "That's nice, dear." I forced a thin smile. The truth was, I couldn't have cared less about Linda's hobbies or that pretentious art crowd she ran around with. As far as I was concerned, her role was to be the perfect corporate wife, to host the dinner parties, attend the charity luncheons, and maintain the flawless image I required. With the breakfast dishes cleared, I retreated upstairs to prepare for the all-important meeting with Johnson's company. Straightening my tie, I gazed at my reflection and saw the persona I had so carefully cultivated. Powerful, commanding, successful. A man nobody dared cross. Little did I know, my world was about to be shaken to its very core. It started a few weeks later, when my old friend Jake called out of the blue. "Mike, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice hushed over the phone. "I was at that new art gallery downtown last night and saw Linda there." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Yeah? So what?" "Well, she wasn't alone. Some scruffy artist type had his hands all over her. They were whispering closely, acting pretty cozy if you ask me." White-hot anger surged through my veins. "Linda, my wife, with another man? Are you sure about what you saw?" I managed to ask, struggling to keep my voice even. "Positive, man. I wouldn't kid about something like that." I spent the rest of the evening stewing, my mind racing. Part of me couldn't comprehend it. Linda and I came from good families, old money. We had everything. What more could she possibly want? But the other part understood, all too well, the cracks in our superficial facade. I knew I didn't give her as much attention as I should, too consumed with growing my business empire. The following days passed in a blur as I compiled a detailed plan. Using my resources, I hired a private investigator to surveil Linda's movements. The evidence began piling up, photos of her and some unkempt artist laughing over coffee, clinging receipts for lush hotel rendezvous, even a surreptitiously recorded video of them in a heated embrace. All the while, I played the role of the oblivious husband at home. "Working late again?" Linda would ask with a sweet smile as I arrived well past dinner. "You know how it is, dear," I'd reply through a tight smile. Lots of new opportunities to secure. Her behavior, however, told a different story. The lingering cologne she tried to mask, her distracted gaze during our customary stilted conversations. My anger steadily metamorphosed into something more calculated, more vengeful. I could simply confront her, certainly, but that seemed too mundane for the utter betrayal she had perpetrated. No, I had something much more diabolical in mind. A way to tear Linda's world asunder and punish her in the most public, humiliating way possible. The setting came together perfectly, too. Linda's 35th birthday was approaching, which gave me the perfect pretext to throw an extravagant party under the guise of celebration. One by one, I sent invitations to our entire social circle, her snobby book club friends, her family, my business associates, leaving Linda oblivious that I had one other very special guest in mind. On the night of the gathering, Linda looked resplendent in a sleek burgundy dress as she greeted our upscale guests. The surprise and confusion were evident on her face when she saw her parents and my brother's family arrive. A birthday party? You shouldn't have. She threw me a quizzical glance to which I responded with a sly wink. Soon the upscale crowd had amassed in our great room, sipping expensive cocktails and making vapid small talk. Linda's hand froze, drink halfway to her lips, as the doorbell rang once more. I answered it with a self-satisfied grin, coming face to face with the scruffy artist she had been canoodling with. Tom, so glad you could make it. His eyes widened as he took in the opulent scene before him. I don't understand, Linda said. Gather round, everyone, I boomed, putting an arm around the hapless Tom and guiding him inside. Let's get this party started with a little entertainment, shall we? A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned toward us. Linda's face drained of color, her mouth agape in sheer terror. Michael? What's going on? She managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Well, aren't you going to introduce us to your friend here? I replied with a wolfish grin. After all, he traveled all this way for your birthday celebration. Tom stared at me blankly, realization slowly dawning that he had stumbled into a trap. Linda, I thought you said this was just a small gathering with some of your friends. I didn't know. Enough, I roared, quieting his babbling excuses instantly. I've stood by too long watching you make a mockery of our marriage with this sculptor of garbage passing itself off as art. Gesturing to one of my men, I produced a remote control and aimed it at the large flat screen mounted above the fireplace. But tonight, I get the final word. With a click of the button, the screen flickered to life, displaying photographs of Linda and Tom in various states of intimacy, huddled at a cafe table, locked in a passionate embrace outside his crummy apartment building. Hushed gasps rippled through our crowd of spectators. No, Michael, please, you have to listen to me. Linda's eyes shone with unshed tears, her pallid cheeks flushed with humiliation. I'm not finished, I responded coldly, clicking through a procession of damning images and videos, each more explicit than the last. The secluded lovers' motel rendezvous, the fevered kissing in Tom's dingy art studio, all displayed in high definition for our stunned guests to drink in. The great room descended into an almost eerie quiet when the reel concluded. I turned to face the captive audience, clearing my throat. Well, reactions? Nobody dared speak. Linda's mother opened and closed her mouth soundlessly, aghast. My own brother averted his gaze in secondhand shame. How? Tom was the first to find his voice, raising his reddened face defiantly in my direction. How could you do something so cruel? So twisted? With a deft smirk, I sauntered toward the stunned artist, staring him down. Because she needed to learn what betrayal costs in my world. What breaking the sacred vows of our marriage has wrought. Panic flickered across Tom's features as his eyes dragged down to the expensive Italian loafers on my feet. A silent threat that the consequences were only beginning to unfurl. Maybe now you'll both understand that I don't make idle warnings, I growled in a low, menacing tone. Now get out of my home. I'm not finished extracting my pound of flesh. Tom fled from the room, hunched and cowed. With the smallest of satisfied smiles, I turned back to my wife, who stood paralyzed and shattered amid the debris of her shredded reputation. The only thing left is to determine how little you deserve to leave with, my dearest wife, I proclaimed loudly for all to hear. I'll make sure the divorce courts comprehend the extent of your transgressions. You'll be lucky to salvage a modest apartment when I'm through with you. My words catalyzed an instant eruption of horrified murmuring and incredulous stares from those assembled. Even the most oblivious socialites raptly understood the gravity of the situation. Linda crumpled to the floor in a heap, sobbing broken-heartedly as the reality of her undoing crystallized. With a dismissive wave of my hand, I ushered the tittering onlookers toward the exits. Party's over, folks, I called out in clipped tones. Mrs. Peyton here seems to have taken ill. Do get home safely now?" The room emptied until only Linda and I remained. She was crumpled on the floor, sobbing brokenly into her hands. I stared at her dispassionately, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. "Get up," I said flatly after several moments. "You look pathetic down there." Linda raised her head. Eyes swollen and mascara streaked down her blotchy cheeks. "How could you? In front of everyone? How could I?" I shook my head incredulously. "You're the one who betrayed our sacred vows, our partnership. I merely showed the world the kind of repulsive liar and fraud you truly are. I never meant to hurt you, Michael. I still love you in a way." Her voice was barely above a broken whisper. I laughed derisively. "Save your sniveling for someone who might actually believe it. I'm through being spun lies and deceptions." Turning on my heel, I began to walk away before pausing in the doorway. "The lawyers have been instructed accordingly," I tossed over my shoulder. "Enjoy your modest new living arrangements, my dear. It's more than you deserve after what you've done." With that, I left Linda alone to wallow in the aftermath of her ruination. Her beloved art community closed off, her family ties severed, her social standing in tatters. She had chosen the path of a whore, and now she would reap the consequences. As for me, I had methodically excised the cancer from my life, preserving the empire and reputation that truly mattered. I would forge onward, steely and remorseless as always, ascending to even greater corporate dominance and material spoils. Let this be a reckoning for anyone else who dared trifle with my dominion. I was a man beyond reproach, or so I told myself as the loneliness began to creep back in. The following weeks swept by in a flurry of paperwork and terse lawyers' meetings. As promised, I wielded every insidious advantage afforded to me, ensuring the divorce proceedings would leave Linda destitute and disgraced. No more upscale art galas or country club luncheons in her future. One late afternoon, I encountered her on the street, hauling boxes of her meager belongings toward a beat-up sedan. She froze in her tracks, eyeing me apprehensively. "Michael, hi," she said hesitantly. I regarded her coolly, taking in her downtrodden appearance, the ill-fitting second-hand clothes, the weary lines etched across her face. "I hope you've learned something from all this," I said with finality, before brushing past her and continuing briskly on my way. She meant nothing to me now, a mere insect to be crushed beneath my $1,000 Oxfords. Tom, too, had paid dearly for his indiscretion, from what I gathered. Thanks to my meddling influence, not a single gallery in this city would touch his derivative daubings. I had ushered him toward a fate of outcast mediocrity, the insipid artist doomed to decorate the walls of laundromats and bus terminals at best. As for me, I was unscathed, invincible, even, the master of my domain once more. With Linda and her sordid dalliance fully expunged from my life, I settled back into my routines, working grinding hours, continually tightening my stranglehold on this city's business elite, squiring the next crop of vapid but socially advantageous paramours. I was the king of my impeccably manicured kingdom, surveying my realm with a jaded but satisfied eye. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.